from the heart of Dubai, where tomorrow is being built today, to the world. Welcome to the CTO Show with Mehmet. Here, we redefine technology and reimagine possibilities. With Mehmet, delve into the riveting realms of AI, cybersecurity, and digital technology. Experience the thrilling highs and lows of startups. Immerse yourself in the spirit of entrepreneurship and witness the future of business innovation being written in real time. Now, without further ado, let's tune in and explore the future.
Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today, I'm very pleased joining me from the US, and thank you, Mark, for staying late. In your
Very
time,
welcome.
Mark Donnigan, he's a virtual CMO, uh, have a lot of experience about marketing, especially with tech startups. And Mark also has a podcast like myself. We're gonna talk about many topics today, but of course, everything marketing for startups, tech startups in specific, and of course, AI. We're gonna touch about the AI. We're gonna touch about like a couple of other topics also as well. Without further ado, this is what I do with all my guests, Mark. You know, tell us a little more about you, your background, your journey, and what brought you to what you're currently doing.
Great. Well, first of all, Mehmet, thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here. Really excited to talk to your audience. So, real quick introduction. I am actually a technologist at heart. Although I have never worked professionally as an engineer, my first 2 years of university were computer science. I taught myself to program when I was 12, and some of your listeners will pick up on the fact that I said program, not develop, which gives away my age. I found my school's Apple II, and actually, it's kind of a cool story. An uncle of mine who I actually rarely saw. He lived a long distance, but like once a summer, we'd go back and visit kind of our relatives, and so I'd see my uncle. And when I turned 12, he said, I want to buy you some books. He loved books. And I don't even remember. I think I got like 3 books, but one of them, he said, I want you to pick out any book you want. And so we went to the bookstore, and there was a book on basic, but it was, today we would call it kind of the dummies guide, because I remember it was really kind of illustrated, and it was something like a 12-year-old could kind of look at and go, this looks cool. And I said, I want that book. And I went home and I just immersed myself, in learning the language, found my school's Apple II. I think I actually knew that they had one, but, asked the teacher, hey, can I stay after school? And so the point is that, those are my roots. Now, interestingly enough, I also was an artist. And
Nice.
in fact, let's see, when I was 11, so the year before, so I guess I was sixth grade in the US, it would be like 6th grade. If I remember right, I entered an art competition at the state fair, and I got like a 3rd place ribbon against the adults, so I guess I was drawing pretty well. But looking back, of course, you can say, wow, I had this clearly this left brain logical side, because I was very drawn to the structure, of programming and of language. And at the same time, I was creative, so the connection to all that is that years later, as I ended up not finishing my computer science degree and going to music school. So see, it shows left brain, right brain.
Right.
I woke up one day and I went, okay, I'm actually a fairly decent musician. I could play pretty well. But I realized, looking at my peers around me, my friends and fellow students, that it's really hard to make a living, and it's really hard to make a good living as a musician. So I was rational enough to say, okay, I love music. It'll always be a love of my life, but I need to find a way to, it's like make a nice living, be able to support a family one day, that sort of thing. Went into sales, that got me into marketing. always worked in technology companies. And, as the saying goes, you wake up one day and you look back and say, wow, how did I get here? So, but that's the connection. And that's also why I love technical founders.
Mm-hmm.
I love technical founders because I can relate. I speak the language, although again, I've never actually been an engineer. I don't code today, although I'm loving all the no code, low code tools that are out there. Doing a lot in the AI space with those. Just personally, building tools. But yeah, it's a really good fit because the challenge is, there is that creative side of how are you going to take a deep technology and drive that into the market. As we well know, the best technology doesn't actually build a business, which is really sad that that's true, but it is true. How many great technologies have absolutely failed, and how many companies have been wildly successful, on the backs of technology that, though good, maybe wasn't actually the best. But guess what? They got right was sales and marketing, and so that's what connected to me. And so I love working with founders and helping them, build, exciting businesses around their inventions and their innovations.
Great, and thank you again, Mark, for making it today. Now, I want to
Absolutely.
start with your experience working with founders, right?
Mm,
So, and startups, usually tech startups, they start with very very small teams, like probably maybe a couple of founders, two, one, two, three, right? And probably they have like maybe someone doing the coding, an engineer or
yeah,
something like that,
yeah.
and then they start to figure out, and probably at the beginning they would be trying to take the product to the market. Now I know you say small teams beat big teams, like
Yeah.
can you break this down to us, like what are like some of the principles that make it so true in practice?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question because a trap that I actually see founders fall into, especially if they have gone down the VC, the venture funded route, or if they're just fortunate enough to be able to generate a lot of cash early, and so they find themselves with money, and which is a good thing. So, so that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But it's somebody usually gives them the advice, maybe through an advisor, through a VC, through some investor, through some friend, who's also founding a company. Hey, you need to build a marketing team. You need to hire salespeople. And so again, depending, the phase of the company and how much money they have, that may mean hiring one person, in marketing and one person for sales, or it might be, let's go build a team. Let's hire 5 people in marketing and, let's get 7 or 8 people in sales. And next thing you know, over a very short period of time, they have a very expensive function across sales and marketing. And at some point, my phone often rings. And I know this story because I've seen it played out over and over and over again. And the story goes like this. The story goes, Mark, we need you to help. Can you come talk to us, or can we have a conversation? So, I do normal discovery. Okay, tell me about your market, what you're going to market. Do you have a marketing team? How big is it? And I get the whole lay of the land, right? And invariably, I hear, oh, but we're so excited because we raised our Series A, or we raised, a Series B, or we raised a really large seed round. And, the investors said we need to build marketing. So we landed somebody from, I won't name a company, but some major,
Hmm.
tech company. We got somebody who had been there for 5 years during their growth curve. They ran demand gen, or they ran social media marketing, or they ran, some function, probably not the head of marketing, but, some significant team member. They've been here a year and we're just not seeing any results, we think we need to replace them, but we're so excited and they were there for 5 years. Like, what's happening? And the same thing can happen in sales, by the way, although we'll put a pin in that because we're here to talk about marketing, but I've seen it play out in sales, almost the exact same story. And what happens, and the whole thing about small teams, beat big teams, is that when you are still trying to identify your product market fit, when you're
Mhm.
still really defining your ICP, when you're still, even if you have some traction, and you see visibility to, maybe $10 million ARR, $20 million ARR, which again, if you've done that in a short period of time, is really successful, like that's a good thing. But even if you have traction, there still is so much to figure out that when you take a bigger team, which is really only 4 or 5 people, so I don't mean 15 or 20, but 4 or 5 people, you're going to end up saying, okay, this person's responsible for this particular channel of marketing. This person's, owns, design. This person owns this function. And by the nature of you've given them that responsibility, now they're making decisions that are for the best of their function, but not for the impact to the organization. And I almost want to repeat that again because that it's easy to miss what I just said. What I
Right.
said is that you could hire somebody who truly, let's just say social media marketing, so LinkedIn, for example, and you can look at their resume, you can look at their background, you can check their references, and everybody can say, this person at the previous company took us from, we only had 3,000 people following our page to, 18 months later, we had 30,000. We could verify that, 10, 20, 30% of our pipeline was coming in through that channel. In other words, they can really legitimately say that this person did a phenomenal job. The problem is that odds are very, very good that that previous company already had an established base, already had a defined ICP, already had a brand position in the market. And that's not to say it was easy. It's a different
Mhm.
set of challenges, right? But for a startup, you just can't transpose, the same activities. And so what startup founders fall into, and the reason why I get the phone call, and a lot of times it is a little bit of, as I like to say, head scratching, because the founder's like, I really like the person. Like I know I fundamentally can feel that they're good at their job, but if I'm objective, like the impact to the business isn't there. So like what's wrong? What, are they faking it? Do we, or what's wrong? And what it is that early stage marketing is about rapid iteration. It's about problem solving. It's about being incredibly creative and adaptive. And so many marketers are trained, not that they're trained not to be those things. They would all say, yes, I am those things. But if you followed them around day to day, in a even just a medium sized company, you'd say, wow, this person basically their job is to repeat a dozen activities day in and day out, adjusting here and there, but basically doing kind of the same thing day in and day out. And in a startup, it just doesn't work. So you need a small team where you can rapidly together move, flex. You can go to different channels, you can experiment, you can do different things. And it's why an early startup hire looks very, very different than when you're hiring into a, kind of a mid phase, company that's 6, 7, 8 years into the market, is just more established.
This is very informative, Mark. And yeah, I've seen, as you said, I've seen this movie many
I
times.
I think
Uh,
everyone has or has known somebody who has.
yeah,
Yeah.
especially the part, and actually it applies not only to marketing, to be fair, like it applies to sales, to other functions as well.
Yeah.
And my theory is, you know, you know, like when someone goes to any investment related website and they tell you like previous results doesn't guarantee the future.
Future.
Which
Yeah.
so I always tell them like like think about it when you want to invest in a stock in the stock market, right?
Yeah.
So maybe it did fantastically well, but you never know, because when now at this time things might be different, like.
That's
And
right.
the other thing I say, Mark, is each startup, each founder, each person, in my opinion, like we live, I call it the three dimension. So it's time, location, and personality.
Yeah.
And if someone does something right there, doesn't mean he gonna or she gonna do very well
Yeah.
in this location, because everything is different. So this is,
That's right.
it's a great point. Now, Mark, like you get this phone calls, right? Like,
Um,
do you have any kind of diagnostic framework, or like maybe what are the things that tells you, like, yeah, you know what, these guys are up to something,
yeah.
I would be able to support them? Or
Yeah.
like I don't like to ask about red flags, I would like to ask about the thing that
Sure.
excites you and
Sure.
push you to say, yeah, like this team
Sure.
is a good team, let's help them in their go to market
Yeah.
strategy.
Yeah, it's a great question, and look, I love yeah, I'm a marketer, right? So I love
Yeah,
frameworks. So I would actually very much like to be able to pull out my 5-step framework with a cool acronym that goes with it.
sure.
That I can say, okay, follow this. The reality of the matter is, I think of it more like signposts, or
Mhm.
almost like traffic lights, green, yellow, red. And I think in general in business, that's actually just a more healthy way, because I just think that we live in such a dynamic world, on every dimension, right? Not just business, but the world is just too dynamic. And so let me tell you this, the signposts, or the traffic lights that I look for,
Sure.
I and it starts with, one of the first things would be, um, this will sound easy, but let me unpack, or this will sound like obvious, but let me unpack what I mean. Is it, does the market actually need what you're building? Now everybody's going to say, well, of course, but I mean, if they even have a little bit of business, the market needs it. It's like, not so quick, like there's a whole lot of reasons why companies can actually buy products and actually not need them, or, they buy them thinking that they need them and then find out they don't. And so just because a company has gotten to one, two, three, five, maybe even $6 or $7 million doesn't mean that they have a product that the market actually needs. And so, what's difficult about this is that obviously the founder has a well honed pitch that is just going to make you want to, there's a saying, for those that live in Alaska, being in the US, and live around a lot of ice and snow, it's like selling, it's selling ice to, Eskimos, or to the, to the
Right.
Alaskan people, like, like they could sell to anybody, the founder. But you really have to then dig a step below and say, okay, but what is the problem you're solving? And if they can articulate back to me in a reasonable way that is not difficult to understand, here is the problem we solve. And here's what our current customers, here's what our early, clients, customers are telling us, and here's why they bought us. If they can articulate that, then that's the first green light that tells me, all right, then I want to keep talking, you know so that's the first gate. Now, interestingly enough, this is related to marketing, because so many marketers, and I found this too, of marketing leaders, or just marketers who have joined companies, and then maybe they haven't lasted very long. Maybe they were sort of pushed out, maybe they were fired, maybe they just got so frustrated they left, over a short period of time. And almost always it's like, well, yeah, I mean, it wasn't a marketing problem they had. Like, you could be the best marketer in the world, whatever that looks like, and you wouldn't have solved their problem.
Mhm.
Like, maybe you would have slightly been able to find a few more people and made a few more sales, but you wouldn't have saved the company. So the first thing is this a product or solution technology that the market actually needs? And then correlated with that is, can the founder tell that story? Now, occasionally I get into a situation where my personal analysis is that yes, they have something, but the founder still can't tell the story. So then my first job is to help that founder tell the story, because if we don't do that and we just sort of amplify what isn't working, again, I'm going to fail. And whatever we do in marketing will fail. So that's like the first step. Now, the next traffic light that we have to get through is does the founder or the founding team understand who the buyer is?
Mhm.
Now, this is again, some of these things, and I'm even, I'm probably reading someone's mind, who's listening to the show right now, listening to this episode, going, okay, come on, this guy's this obvious stuff, like, of course, who's the buyer? Well, if you don't know the buyer, but listen carefully to what I'm saying, because in a B2B, and I am only talking B2B here. So if any listeners are
Cool.
in B2C, that's a different paradigm, whole different framework. But in B2B, the buying committees are so diverse today. And at least in my experience selling, especially technology products, there really is not the notion anymore. And I'm just finding it to be universally true. It doesn't matter the industry, it almost doesn't matter the deal size. The notion of finding the budget holder and then convincing that person to buy your product is over. Like the budget holder is now a committee. It's multiple people. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't a single person who is responsible for putting a signature on an agreement. Obviously that's still the case. There's still the CFO that ultimately has to
Of
sign, or
course.
there's the EVP, or there's the CEO or whatever. But so there's still that person. But I have seen case after case after case where I've been involved in sales processes that have not closed, where it was not because, oh, we failed to convince the budget holder. It's because some stakeholder on the buying committee had an objection that was reasonable enough that it was able to override. And then maybe there were enough other people had similar objections and overrode. And in every case where I've experienced this and we've lost a deal, the budget holder, who always is the most senior person on the team, never has overridden them, not even one time. And this includes a sales engagement where we were selling to the CTO of AT&T. And I don't
Mhm.
mean a group CTO, I mean the CTO of AT&T. And he did not override an individual contributor, a subject matter expert, who was probably 6 levels, but maybe even 8 levels below him. I mean, AT&T is a huge organization, right? But this person had a very specific remit and responsibility in an area of technology. And unfortunately for us at the time, they had a different view on what our technology could do. And basically we couldn't get the deal done. And so you have to understand really who your buyer is, who the buying committee is, and who the decision makers are. So I see many, many, many founders get hung up over, and it's really natural, right? You go to a tech conference and you meet someone from Meta, and you meet someone who has a fancy title on their business card. Well, they don't hand out business cards anymore, but you look them up on LinkedIn, and and they've been there 10 years, and they come back so excited, convinced that in 3 months they're going to close a deal with Meta, only to find out later that that person is very important, but they're part of a committee, of a
Mhm.
group, that they're just one member, and by the way, the other people have a totally different view. And that poor startup beats his head against the wall, beats his head, go to meeting after meeting after meeting, thinking, why can't we get this done? This person's so excited. Look at, and it's like, well, because they're not actually a buyer. They're actually not the buyer. They're not really, now they're an influencer, maybe. That's not to say that they aren't a piece of the buying, but they're not. And so startup founders struggle with this. And the goal of marketing, the job of marketing is to the reason why it's important that a marketer understands this and then that a founder understands it to direct marketing efforts is that, if the view is, oh, we sell to vice presidents of, I'm just being generic here, but vice presidents
Sure.
of engineering of companies from, 500 to 5,000, which again, very common, right? Like, oh, let's get a persona, the persona. Well, okay, it is true that your buyer may often have that title. So there's nothing wrong with that. But what function does that person have in the organization? Are they actually responsible for, overseeing the primary engineering function? Are they operating a little more as a CTO? Are they, what's their real function? Or, for your audience, CTOs, like, are they really a technical CTO that's leading engineering? Are they kind of more of a technically minded business person who's, look, like, if you don't understand that, you could get stuck thinking, but we've got a meeting with the CTO. We're going to lock this thing in. And it's like, no, because actually the person who really makes the decision is over here and has a totally different job title and responsibility, you know?
Yeah,
So can you relate to this?
a lot, a lot. I can, a lot. I can, Mark. Like, and like part of this. This is where I tell people usually is that you need to think lean, right? So, uh, yeah, I can understand sometimes. And you said the joke about people who can sell ice to the Eskimos, right? Yeah, actually, I've seen someone on LinkedIn who put this as his
Yeah.
you know
Yeah. I'm
so
not sure. I'm not sure. On one hand, there's in certain environments that would be really cheered and praised, and then in others, it's like, well, the problem is that those sales usually don't stick, and
yeah,
so you
yeah,
you
yeah,
know
yeah, yeah.
it's one thing to
100.
get the initial PO, but then if you don't get the follow-on orders, or if they want to return what they bought, like, well, that's actually not so
Yeah,
good.
absolutely. So
Yeah.
so
So,
um
so that's a green light. And then, we can keep going. You can imagine that what happens as you progress on this journey, like I
right.
used the street light analogy, so first of all, like, can you even really understand, do you really know, like, what your technology is whether it's needed, and then can you articulate that? So that's kind of the very first gate that you have to get through. Then you have to do you know actually who your buyer is? And then you get into some of the more depending on how technical your product is, then you might get into, you're pretty much then in the realm of almost product marketing, and now you're really like, okay, now we have to make sure that, we have the types of materials available that the customer is going to need to even make a decision. This is where I like to call it mapping the buyer's journey. And the buyer's journey is not just, looking at, okay, who in the organization are the influencers or the decision makers, that we need to make sure that we convince, to buy our product, our solution, our technology. But it's really like, what's the process? Like, when does a POC happen? Does a POC even happen? What does a POC look like? What kind of support do they need from us as the vendor or as the company selling the product? Are there multiple POCs? Are there different phases that the POC needs to happen? Like that's super important because again, marketing can support the sales process. It can support the sales process by saying, hey, we know that at this certain stage, um, the CFO or someone, with kind of a financial lens is going to get involved and say, hey, I really want to validate that the claims that we're going to save, $10 million a year are true. Again, I'm hypothetical making,
Sure.
but okay, well then marketing needs to have prepared case studies and support materials and maybe calculators and all of this and have it be readily accessible, not sort of hidden, and not where a sales rep has to, say, hey, let me send you the calculator. Like it should be available on the website. It should be clearly articulated so that when that CFO on a Thursday night is preparing for the Friday meeting and is thinking, gee, I haven't actually, like, I wonder if these people's claims are even true. And they go to your website, well, all that should be available. But if the marketer doesn't know, that that's a step that almost every sales engagement is going to pass through, maybe they're not creating those materials, and that may not cause you to lose the deal, but it's certainly going to make the deal take longer to close because now the CFO shows up to that Friday morning meeting and says, hey, we're really excited about this. We really hope your claims are true, but can you send me, like, I want to see some case studies. Could you send me some references? Do you have any calculators? And it's kind of ridiculous to think that you say, oh yeah, we have all those things. Well, why wasn't that easily available so that on Thursday night, when the CFO went to the website, they could find it, So,
A lot of things to uncover with you, Mark. But I want to start with this one. The latest point
yeah.
about how much information is available, which is mainly content, right? Um, is it underrated in your opinion by some startups and founders? I mean, in a sense, having these use cases is ready. I can understand when they are new, they don't have this, but we are talking about now, probably they have acquired a couple of customers, uh,
Exactly. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So how much this you think is underrated? Because honestly, I've seen it. I want to hear your opinion
Yeah.
from general content perspective, whether it's the website itself, like use cases on the
Yeah.
website, maybe probably also the tools, like as you mentioned, ROI is a good example also as well. More, and this is something I would love to hear your opinion on, is this thing which started recently, not recently, it's been there for a while, but I mean, it accelerated, which is like the founder content led
Yeah.
approach also as
Oh,
well.
I love to talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so, so why all this? I see it underrated. First, do you agree with me? And what's the importance also
Yeah.
of all what we mentioned?
I think Mamet, I have a little bit of a different. I don't necessarily, at least I've not met any founders who like don't get the value of the content. So maybe you're not exactly saying underrated, like they don't believe it's important. But I guess you can make the case like, well, if they believed it's important, wouldn't they have addressed it? Wouldn't they be putting, the resources behind creating the materials? I what I run into is to I run into a little bit of polar opposites, which is kind of interesting. Interesting that most companies that I engage with, now this is just this may just be that I'm sort of lucky. They actually have all of the information and even sometimes too much. Although you could say, well, is it really too much? But I mean, they've got it all, but it's so poorly organized, or it's all like engineering docs that needs to then be turned into more readable, articles and white papers and application notes and so like the content is there. I mean, the source is there, sources are there, but it just needs to be turned into something. Now, that's a wonderful problem. And like I said, maybe I'm just super lucky because almost every company that I've worked with has been in that category where I've come in, I've said, wow, We really don't have a content problem, as in nothing exists. But what does exist is either just not simply made available, it's hidden so nobody can see it, or it's engineering docs, or it's just not written in a way that it's understood, so that's a different. Where I find the reason I said polar opposites, where I find a startup doesn't have any real material is I've never had somebody sort of say, "Well, Mark, is this really a good ROI?" They always sort of sigh and say, "We've been dying for the last 3 years to get to this. We're stretched so thin." Again, limited resources, right, of a startup. And so, um, I guess I would say this. I would say that if you're a startup founder, or you're working in a startup now and you realize you have one of these two problems, like, yeah, we actually have a lot of content, but for some reason our users can never find it, or our sales team always complains that, they don't know where things are. Okay, there's some very practical steps that we can take to fix that, to remedy that. If it's on the other side where it's like, oh, we've been dying to create the content. We know we need to. We know it's really a problem, but we just don't have the time. Well, you got to make the time. You have to make the time. And the way to get started is to simply look at the buyer's journey and pick the most significant um, area where every one of your deals trips up. So I work, for example, almost exclusively in an area of video technology. It's called video encoding. And so you think like a Netflix is an example, which I'm sure, all of your listeners,
Sure.
probably have a subscription or aware of Netflix, any streaming service. There's a very important function that takes, a very large video file and compresses it into a much smaller video file so that it can be streamed more smoothly over the internet. Very easy to understand what the process is, highly technical. But there always is a process when you're selling this type of technology called an encoder, that it goes through an evaluation, which makes sense, right? You would think, okay, somebody wants to both objectively and subjectively measure the performance. Subjective is, I take a file, I use your encoder, I look at it on a TV or on a mobile phone or on some, on a laptop or whatever, and I say, does that look good to me? Obviously it's more complicated than that, but it's like, does that look good? And then there's other, well, it, in the world that I live in, like anybody who's selling this solution needs to have a set of documents around how to set up their product, how to optimize their product, even suggested ways to evaluate their product. Because if you just turn it over to somebody, they might use the wrong modes. They might use the wrong, there's some parameters that they enter incorrectly and they get a bad result. And so this is the job of marketing, is to make it as easy as possible, because there is nobody who's going to buy a solution like that who doesn't want to see it.
Right.
What does it do? Even if it's nearly free, because nothing in life is free. So, even if it's like open source, there's a whole evaluation process. So that's an example. So founders need to think about, can just go back. If you're struggling with the fact you have nothing today or very limited, just think like, okay, and I guarantee for every sales process, there's at least something that, if not 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10 buyers are going to want to validate. So then build a tool, build some content around that. And then that right there is where you get started. And then you just expand out from there.
Cool. Now, Mark, because also you mentioned about how the market is so dynamic nowadays, and we know I can't skip this topic in any of my episodes, which is AI.
AI.
Um, right? So, how, in your opinion, um, I can, as a founder, or we as founding team,
Mhm.
utilize what you call it AI first marketing,
Yeah.
right? So we can have, you know, good performance, right?
Yeah.
And how far, if you want, the AI can help in all the things that you just mentioned, right?
Yeah.
So, because, you know, um, if you ask people, especially in tech founders, we don't have time. Like we have bunch of things to
Of
do.
course. Yeah.
Right, right. Well, which is again, I'm not here to blame anyone. Fully understand. You know, I've seen that before also. But tell me more about, you know, the AI powered
Yeah.
marketing and how it can outperform, even again with the theme of small teams.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's interesting. I have always believed in smaller teams beat bigger teams. So even before the Chat GPT moment,
Yeah.
I've just generally found, it's just like, in the army, there's the army, the large, what do they call them, platoons or something with a lot of soldiers, and then there's the special forces, with just 6 or 8, people who can go in and do these really difficult missions. And so I've always believed in that whole, I've just found it to be true. When you've got a group of incredibly talented specialists who are very focused together, they can be really, really effective. But AI is the accelerator to this, and so here's some things that I found to be true in marketing when you look at the tools. And, it's a whole episode by itself, Mamet. So,
Sure.
we could, have a whole episode just talk about AI in marketing. But what I have found is that for design, you still need designers. The image generation tools are very cool, they're very powerful, they make for wonderful demos, and I'm not saying that there isn't a place for them and they can't be useful. But generally speaking, you still need designers. They're not there yet. Now, AI is wonderful for taking unstructured data and turning it into white papers, blog posts, articles, all kinds of things, social media posts, all kinds of things. And that in combination with a human, I call it human in the loop, is just like rocket fuel. And so for founders, actually, I think founders are in a perfect position to use these tools, because a founder, again, your audience and the founders I work with are technical, which means that they're very drawn to these tools. They're probably already somewhat experts, in
Hmm.
using a lot of the LLMs. So you don't need to teach them prompting. You don't, like they already know that. They may not be experts in marketing, but guess what? These tools, with the right prompts and with the kind of a little bit of guidance, can produce an amazing result that certainly maybe a true expert marketer could have produced a little bit of a better result. But I'll bet you what a founder who doesn't really know too much about marketing but does understand the tools can get is better than a lot of marketers that are out in the market today. you know so we can talk more about maybe some of the specifics about how you do that, but I really just suggest don't be shy, and don't be shy to get started with something as simple as you have a PRD, you know and as long as that PRD is sufficiently detailed about the product, um feed the PRD into your model of choice. I'll tell you, I love Gemini 2.5 Pro. It's my really my go-to.
Hmm.
Chat GPT 5.0 Pro and now 5.1 was just released, I think yesterday or
Yeah.
maybe today even. Chat GPT is very, very effective. For writing, Claude has its place. I use it a little bit less. I'm using Perplexity to do research, Perplexity Pro to do research. But if we go back to Gemini 2.5 Pro and Claude 5.0 Pro or 5.1, feed it the PRD and write a prompt that is obviously a little more detailed than what I'm going to speak here, but that is, I am a, product marketer for, name of your company, um, for this product, and give just a one sentence description of the product. Hopefully it's on your website, hopefully there's a little bit of, of information, that can be found online. I'm giving you the PRD. I would like to write a blog post that introduces, this solution, with the core audience being, and then fill in one of your ICPs, So again, you have to give it enough detail and context, but it doesn't have to
Right.
be an 18-page prompt, and you will be absolutely shocked at what you'll get back, and then this is the human in the loop. You have to read it. Don't just copy and paste and post it on LinkedIn, or on the website, but read it. There'll be some things where you're like, oh, yeah, that actually makes sense, but, we're not in that market yet, or, and you modify it. But I'll tell you, it's my secret, secret weapon, which is not so secret because everybody I work with knows that I am AI first and AI powered, but it's how I can be as effective as I am.
Right. Mark, in your opinion, um, other than content and, generating probably, as you said, of course, no copy and paste. Any other part of the GTM do you think that they can kind of, let's say,
Yeah.
rely on AI for it? Like we started to see, AI SDRs, for example,
Mm,
and like from marketing perspective and the GTM, you know, let me ask this way, which make it maybe easier.
yeah.
Which part should always stay human?
um, well, I think, it's a very good, that's actually a great question. I don't think I've actually been asked the question that way. I've been asked this question from a different angle, but which parts of marketing should stay human, and all the tasks? I was thinking about this the other day, and I was thinking about in the context of what is my role today?
Hmm.
I'm even investing in building AI tools. Now, at the moment, I've decided not to, like, build a software company around it. So I'm not building some sort of a marketing, tools software company. Who knows? Maybe one day it'll turn into that. But I'm building them for my own use and the use of the companies I work with and for, so I was thinking about this, and the conclusion I came to is that I'm acting more like a curator today. I'm acting like a curator. And if you think about it, I happen to, like DJ music, being a musician, which might be a little counterintuitive. I still play and all, but, I actually really enjoy, listening to a good DJ. And if you think about what a DJ does, whether it's in just a traditional nightclub or if it's in some other setting, but they're a curator of music, like a good one. Now there's plenty that are, they're just kind of playing the same stuff over and over, right? But the really good ones, when you go and you leave the club, or you leave the lounge or whatever, and you're like, wow, that was just so good. It's because they were masterfully choosing and curating the styles and then blending them together and mixing it together. So there was this whole new experience that was created from what was otherwise just a whole string of single songs, which you could have obviously just hit play on, and then that one ended, and hit play on the next one and play on the next one. And you might have still enjoyed on some level the music, but it would not have been the full experience of the way it was mixed together and blended, and, all of that. And I think that that is the human part with AI. And the analogy that I would say, the curation, is there isn't today almost anything significant that I write with the models that hasn't gone through multiple models. And interestingly enough, it's not like I have a workflow that says, okay, I have a prompt, for a blog post, right? That starts in Gemini 2.5 Pro. And then I take it into ChatGPT, and then I take it back, and then I let Grok do something. And then, it's not, it's that it's in real time, in the moment, as I'm reading, and as I'm analyzing, I'm looking at the output. I know what I'm looking for, and I'm constantly adjusting. And then at some point, it's fingers on the keyboard, right? And so that's the curation process. And so I think where you're just not going to be able to replace the human, that is for the highest level. In other words, the content where people say, wow, that was brilliant. I think we're going to I think we're already at a place where the LLMs can produce, wow, that was good,
Yeah.
but not brilliant.
No, not
Like
yet.
I routinely find myself saying, wow, that is good. When I get an output. In fact, now I almost always do, so I don't tell myself that, because it's like, okay, I expect that, right? But I still do not say, wow, that's brilliant. you know
Mhm.
I'm still then either putting fingers on the keyboard and and editing it, or I'm saying, I wonder if I added more context here, and if I brought, if I asked it to do some research in this direction, and then we're continuing to refine it. And so that's what I find, is that's the human in the loop. And I just don't see, we are a long ways away from where we're going to get to that, where it's just push button and it's going to be, that's brilliant. And like the human cannot improve it any further. I think we're a long ways away from that.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Mark, also as well, because here where the feedback loop would play a role, because even if
Yeah.
I say, wow, this is brilliant, maybe this is for me, I would go and put it out there, and I don't see the interaction or the results that I'm waiting for, right?
Yeah.
So in my opinion, this is where the human aspect would come and feed this feedback loop back there. Maybe this is my own thought on this. I think you wanted to say something there.
Uh, Well, I was gonna tell you about a conversation I had
Sure.
just last week, which dovetails into what you just said, and also one of the very interesting pitfalls of AI content. So, a couple of years ago, AI loved to talk about landscapes and everything. There were just these words that it would write, that you're kind of like, okay, I know consultants write that way, but like the rest of us don't. And so and then next thing you knew, everything on LinkedIn was written in the same way, and you're just like, okay, this is Chat GPT. And then came the M dashes, the little dash between words, and M
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
dashes were all over the place. Now, interestingly enough, the M dash, there's sort of this little, funny little, war between marketers and writers, because M dashes are completely legitimate, in English, completely legitimate grammatical mark, I mean, completely legitimate. They have a very defined space. There are some authors that use them quite effectively. It's a major part of the writing. And so these people are really upset. Like, now I can't use M dashes because people think it's like ChatGPT wrote it, The interesting thing is the models have now progressed so far that they no longer use all these AI words. They no longer use M dashes. Only very occasionally do I have to remove them. And I still do, just because people just, it's just sort of ingrained in them. Like, they see an M dash, they go, oh, this must have been Chat GPT. So, um, so, um, so what happens is it you've got this you've got the machine writing this perfect output. And the conversation I had last week was, I was talking to one of the LinkedIn influencers. I think LinkedIn has a special program. There's only, like, I don't know, 300 people in it, in like the whole world. And these are the top voices across, different things. I don't know how they choose them, but I actually co-host a podcast with this person. And so he was telling me about some conversations that he was having with the LinkedIn marketing team or excuse me, the product team, not the marketing team. And so I was sort of lamenting that, some of my impressions were down and, like
Oh yeah.
I'm like, what's going on? So he was looking at my profile and he made this really interesting observation, which at first I'm like, what are you what are you talking about? That's not a bad thing. He said, Mark, he said, your your writing's too nice. He
Oh
said,
yeah.
I look at it and it's incredibly well written. You're making very clear points, but it's just too nice. And LinkedIn and the social networks, but especially LinkedIn, wants it to be provocative. Like say that you think somebody or not somebody, but something is crazy. Say that you can't believe, and here's how you would have done it different. Or say like be provocative, and then I started thinking back about, and this isn't because I am only using LLMs to write on LinkedIn, although a lot of posts, get initially sparked there, or started. But I started thinking about, wow, that's human. Like the machines naturally want to kind of be kind and friendly and, like they want to, but, like humans, sometimes, maybe I'm just not in the best mood and, and I see something, it kind of strikes me wrong and I want to write with a little more, I don't know, angst, you know, and and so I would do that as a human, right? But an LLM, it's going to write in this very precise, and there's something about humans that can just pick up on that, like can just, there's just something that causes us to read that post that's nice and maybe nearly perfect. And then that post that maybe the grammar is a little off, maybe there's even a misspelling, but yet it's like, but that's human,
Right.
and so it just, again, it got me thinking based on this conversation, like, wow. Now, of course, it got me also thinking like, I wonder if, I need to change my prompts, so because, LLMs can be provocative and you can even ask them to punch up, and,
Yeah, yeah,
and,
yeah.
and they will,
Absolutely.
and I've written some posts, where I use the punch up in the prompt and, it
Yeah.
definitely makes a difference,
Absolutely. I hope like someone, I'm not sure, hope only someone from LinkedIn product team is listening, or if someone knows someone there, I think they need. But Mark, honestly, this is my personal view. Again, like I respect, each company has the right to do what they think is right to them. I
Yeah.
can't. I can't criticize for the sake of criticizing, but my biggest concern here is because of this approach you just mentioned. It's like the old style newspaper, right? So to sell the newspaper, they used to put, or these magazines, they put these provocative, and still they,
Sensation.
yeah, and still they do it on their websites. Oh, like this is what happened, next, and question. Yeah, come
Yeah.
on, like like
Yeah.
the click. I call it the clickbait.
Click,
Um,
clickbait. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like you can
Yeah.
like let's remember all together, and maybe from a marketer perspective you would agree with me, Mark, like like every time these things became over, they were outperformed by someone who would disrupt this. And
Yeah.
I'm expecting, and a lot of voices in at least in the tech industry, and in anything around the tech industry, like VCs,
Yeah.
investors, operators, they're complaining, sometimes in silence, sometimes
Yeah.
publicly.
Yeah.
And I'm expecting, if LinkedIn doesn't do something about it, they don't remove the guy probably who they have hired from Instagram, this might
Mm.
just out, like someone gonna do something about it. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
this is just
Well,
a thought.
well, so I heard also something else from a pretty major, actually very major platform company in the video space. I was talking to one of their marketers a couple weeks ago, and it's sort of and sort of related to this in a way. You know how we've always heard, don't sell the features, sell the benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this guy said, and this guy runs, he's on the primarily paid acquisition side of the marketing team. So he's running ads. He's he didn't tell me what his budget is, but this is a public company, a very significant company. And so I'm sure he's spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably millions a year, on paid advertising. And he said, you know what we found? We found that nobody cares anymore about the benefits. They
Mm-hmm.
want the features. And whenever we run a benefit like ad or something that's really around, like save, 25%, or get this benefit, they don't perform as well as when we say, here's what this product does. 1, 2, 3.
Mm.
you know and when he first said it, the knee jerk, it's like the doctor with a little hammer on your knee, and the knee kind of, my first is like, well, that's, that can't be right. It was like I found my brain kind of going there, and then I very quickly corrected myself, and I commented back to him. I said, you know, you are so right, because we are so inundated with messages today. Buyers are just, I mean, LinkedIn, through AI, et cetera, all the AI generation, there's so much out there. They're saying, tell me what this can do so that I can make a decision about a very specific problem that I need to solve. Don't give me some high level fluffy. Now, what I'm not saying, and it's not like I've gone and adjusted all my strategies to not talk about benefits. Of course, you still need to educate the market, why, what are the benefits, which translates to ROI. But getting back to making it easy for someone to make a decision. And I just thought that was really profound. And it was interesting to hear from a guy who's tasked with spending large sums of money on advertising. And guess what? He knows, because he has the data to show it. When he says the fluffy stuff, they don't get the ROI in the response. When he just gives the data, the facts, they get the ROI, and I went, wow, okay.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
It's
It's
very, very
fascinating.
interesting. It's very,
Yeah,
very interesting.
yeah.
Mark, really, like the conversation can stay
We
for
can keep
hours
going,
and
and I know we're already over time, I think.
no,
So
it's
thank you
okay.
for
Just,
bearing with
just
me.
no problem. Just final thing, where people can get in touch if they want to learn
Sure.
more about you, the services you offer, so where they can find out more.
Yeah, sure. So I am at growthstage.marketing. That's my website. So it's growthstage.marketing. It's a .marketing domain. Also, if you just search for Mark Donnigan on LinkedIn, you'll find me. I'm very easy to find. So very active on LinkedIn.
Great.
Yeah.
I will make the life easy for the audience. So, as usual, the links to the website and Mark's profile on LinkedIn will be available in the show notes. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting app, you'll find them there. If you're watching this on YouTube, you will see them in the description. Mark, again, I can't thank you enough. Like, this is very, very, I would say, provocative in a way.
That's good.
Uh, yeah, in a positive sense, of course, because I think everyone, and I remember I worked with a company before where their motto was like everyone uh sells, right?
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
big believer in this, and everyone
Yeah.
can be should market also as well, because
Right.
I, I'm I'm an engineer, right? Like, and I was in tech roles, and then I shifted to sales roles. But
Mhm.
what I figured out, there's nothing without marketing. Like, if
That's
you
right.
don't have marketing, to your point that you
Yeah.
made during the episode, like, even if you really can sell
Yeah.
ice to the Eskimos at some
Yeah.
stage to scale, you need marketing.
You need marketing. That's
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
you need to amplify, your voice, and only marketing can do this. So,
That's right.
again, Mark, I really enjoyed. As I said, the links will be in the show notes. And this is to my audience. This is how I end my episodes. If you just discovered us, thank you for passing by. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give me a favor, subscribe, share with your friends and colleagues. And if you are one of the loyal fans, the people who keeps coming again and again, thank you very much for the support, for keeping the podcast this year, 2025, raising in the top 200 Apple podcast charts in the entrepreneurship category in different countries. So I see, the charts always keep moving flag colors. So I'm happy for that. Thank you for the support
Awesome.
wherever you are in the world. And as I say, always stay tuned for a new episode very soon. Thank you. Bye bye.
Hit that subscribe button, share the show with your tech-savvy friends and fellow entrepreneurs, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support means the world to us.